Welcome. Welcome back to the show. Does this ever get tired, just walking around and people cheering for you when you walk into rooms?
Well, I cheer for her.
You cheer for her?
I mean, why not?
Just solo standing ovations?
Well, it is Halloween night, so I think there's a lot of energy in the air.
No. I think you get this. I've watched videos of you walking into restaurants together as a family. I've seen you walking in alone. There seems to be this feeling where you walk around the country and people go, it's a little bit of but it's also yay! That's a cool feel. It's not the presidency, but it's a cool consolation prize,
Well,
no?
that's true. Yeah. It does make up for it a little bit.
Chelsea, thank you very much for being here. You came from trick-or-treating
did.
now.
Yes.
You literally just went trick-or-treating.
Literally.
But you didn't dress up as any, you just took the kids
I
trick-or-treating.
just took the kids. We had a Moana.
Right.
A clock striking midnight from Cinderella.
Okay.
And a pumpkin.
Oh, I like this. I like this. And
the pumpkin didn't choose.
Because
he's 3 months old,
if you
but
came to my
everybody
door
else
on
chose.
Halloween, I'd be
Yes.
like, oh my God, you dressed as Chelsea Clinton. That's amazing. How did you do that?
I've never really thought that I have a built-in Halloween
Yes,
costume.
you have a built-in Halloween costume. Where people, Chelsea Clinton, you're like, no, it's a good makeup though, right? Yeah, it's a good.
Sometimes people will say to us, do you know you look just like Hillary Clinton? And I say, yeah, I've heard that.
Let me say, first of all, congratulations on a phenomenal book. I didn't know what to expect. The Book of Gutsy Women. I didn't know if it was going to be a book about American women, a book about political women, but it's just a book about women who have changed not just their world, but the world in some way, shape, or form. What's interesting is that you wrote it together. You've written many books separately, but this was your first book writing together. As a mother and daughter, as someone who's written a book without my mother, I cannot imagine what it would be like to write something with my mother.
Is that why you're staring at me so
not
intently?
hate each other at this point? What was the process like?
It was a lot of fun. It also did take some adjustment because my mother still writes longhand.
Yes. Writes out the words?
Although I said this at an event and I could see a teenager up in the rafters turn to his mother and say, "What's longhand?"
Because there's a generation that goes what is that? Writing the words out with a pen and no autocorrects.
No, and no ability to track changes or have comment boxes.
Right, and you doing it are you doing it on computer and
yes, 2019.
So how do you? So how do you compare the notes then? When you do you bring the longhand into the digital, or do you give it to her and be like, you longhand my work?
Well, so my mother would take photographs of each page.
Wow.
And then text or email me the photographs of the page.
Wow.
Yeah, so when we were particularly working on the things that we wrote together, we write about Rosa Parks and Claudette Colvin together.
Yes.
So I would type my Claudette Colvin essay and send it to her as an attachment, a Word document, and she would take pictures of each individual page of her Rosa Parks essay and send me page 1.
I can feel your frustration as you're telling me this story.
I'm still working through it.
This is nice.
Yeah.
I can feel that. Why did you choose to write this book together? I mean, you've had many opportunities. You could have written about anything, your family, politics, your life, but this is a specific book, and it feels like for a specific time. Why?
Because we really believe that in today's world, the stories of gutsy women, and literally there are many millions of them, but we chose 103 to write about because their stories tell us, yes, about the struggles that they endured and their persistence to try to improve their own lives and the lives of people around them. But I think, especially in today's world, we need to be reminded of these kinds of stories, and they are historic and contemporary and even a few fictional. And they were women who inspired me as a little girl and then throughout my life, and the same with Chelsea. And in fact, we started talking about inspirational women when she was a little girl. And so we want to share these stories, and we hope that people can find some message that will help them, especially given the difficulties that a lot of people around the world face right now.
It's interesting, Chelsea, because you've said, there was a time in your life when you watched your mom running for president and there were more women in space than running for president.
2.
Right. And now you have a plethora of women. I mean, you have 6 in the race, and you've seen how many women participated in the midterms and won as well. Do you feel like we're noticing a shift in society that's positively moving us to a place where there's equality? Not there yet, but just moving us in that direction?
I think we're absolutely making progress. I also really appreciate how you framed the question, Trevor, because it's super important that we don't get complacent and that we also understand still how far we have to go. I mean, even though we had an unprecedented number of women run for Congress in 2018, we were still less than a quarter of all declared candidates.
Wow.
So making progress, but we still have a long ways to go to get to parity. But as we've seen, like, who runs for office really matters because it determines who holds office. And I'm so thrilled that my children are growing up with the most diverse Congress in American history.
You have chosen 103 women in this book who all have different stories of being gutsy, but what would you find was the common thread that made them who they are?
One, I think the sense of just deep purpose, sometimes something that they knew from when they were a little girl. Like Jane Goodall always knew she wanted to work with animals, and Sally Ride, the first American woman in space, really became a physicist because she wasn't a good enough tennis player. So she kind of found her passion later in life. But what is so distinctive about all these women is that they brought others along with them, sometimes consciously breaking down barriers and sometimes just really aware of their example. And I find that really powerful and gutsy, that it wasn't just for themselves, it was for others too.
Hillary, I have to ask you a question that has been plaguing me for a while. How did you kill Jeffrey Epstein? Because you're not in power, but you have all the power. I really need to understand how you do what you do. Because you seem to be behind everything nefarious, and yet you do not use it to become president. What is the game plan?
Well, Trevor.
But honestly, though, what does it feel like being the boogeyman of the right?
Well, it's a constant surprise to me. Because the things they say, and now, of course, it's on steroids with being online, are so ridiculous beyond any imagination that I could have. And yet they are so persistent in putting forth these crazy ideas and theories. Honestly, I don't know what I ever did to get them so upset. But a lot of them live to come up with these conspiracy theories, and I've gotten kind of used to it. It's been going on for a number of years.
Have you ever thought of just like meeting someone who says like, Hillary, you did this, and just looking at them and being like, yes, I did? I mean, there must be
at some point,
right? At some point,
at some point.
It becomes so ludicrous and it becomes so extreme.
Well, I've had encounters like that, and many of my friends have had, because they've called up people to urge them to like vote for me, or they've knocked on a door and somebody will say, oh, I couldn't do that because, and then they launch into one of their big conspiracies. And I had one very dear friend, who I literally have known my entire life. And she said she listened to this ridiculous conspiracy about me. And she said, I've known her since we were in 6th grade, and none of that is true. And this man looked at her and said, but I saw it on the internet.
But I also think it's because it is effective. Like, I'll never forget reading an article after the 2016 election where the reporter interviewed someone who had been an undecided voter, and he said, he thought my mom had won all 3 debates. She clearly had a greater command of the subject matter, and yet he just kept reading that she had murdered more than 50 people. And he said somewhat nonchalantly, like, I don't think that she murdered 50, but like, what if she murdered 2? And so you just think it's this like constant erosion of truth and sanity.
Right.
But my favorite, and the one that I do secretly hope may be true, is that my mother apparently adopted an alien in 1993, and I've always wanted a sibling. So I hope maybe that one will prove out at some point.
But Trevor, you have to laugh at it because it's so crazy. But on the other hand, we face a serious problem of a lot of these falsehoods and these crazy stories taking on lives of their own, not about me, but about everybody,
right.
And particularly anybody in the public arena. And I have been very outspoken about the decision by Facebook to allow truly false political ads to be run. I want to applaud Twitter for announcing they were not going to let that go forward. And I really hope Facebook changes their mind, because more than half the people in America get their news from Facebook. And
right.
I mean, that's the combination.
Well, but Facebook is a real issue, and we are living in a world where people no longer know what truth is and don't even agree on it, which seems to be a larger issue. You've witnessed the change in politics through many different times. In fact, we're in an interesting period now where the country's gearing up for impeachment, and you are in an interesting position where in your life, you have been literally a part of every single impeachment in some way, shape, or form. You had the Watergate investigations that you were a part of. You then had your husband who was impeached, and now your political opponent is getting impeached. Do you have the impeachment touch? Is this like a thing?
You know, I wasn't part of Andrew Johnson, but, you know, other than that,
Yes.
It is a strange perspective to have because I was a young lawyer investigating Richard Nixon. And I am very pleased that the House today is proceeding in such a deliberative manner. They had that vote today about the procedures because that's what happened in 1974. At first, the American people looked at the idea that Nixon would be impeached after he won a massive landslide in 1972, and they thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. But as the evidence came out, and we were literally working 18 hours a day, compiling evidence, making, you know, the legal arguments, the constitutional arguments, and finally people realized that, yeah, obstruction of justice, abuse of power, contempt of Congress are not what we want to turn a blind eye to in our country. We need checks and balances. It's one of the reasons why the rule of law is at the core of our democracy. So I know the difference about how the House's power is supposed to work, because I was part of seeing it work, I believe, in the right way. One of the people we profile is Barbara Jordan, who, if you go to YouTube, you can see her a speech when she voted on the Articles of Impeachment in 1974 with her defense of the Constitution. And so I'm hoping that now that this is going to move toward public hearings where people can see these witnesses in person, they can be like a juror themselves trying to decide, that the American people will, you know, make a very careful study of what they're being told, because the founders put impeachment in the Constitution for a reason. We have elections, but in between elections, if there's behavior that is undermining our country, endangering our national security, as the allegations here are, it's an extraordinary remedy, but one that has to be exercised in a sober, careful way.
It's interesting because America's in a place where it feels like this process and procedure will be tested more than ever before because of how partisan America has become, because of how, you know, toxic politics in America has become. And I was interested, Chelsea, because I've noticed a lot of people have asked you why you aren't running for an open seat in Chappaqua. You are a resident of New York State. There is a seat that is open, and you have the ability to take that seat in many people's opinion. And you've often said, no, there's other young people who could take it. And everyone said, yes, but you would definitely, you know, take that seat and you would run with it. And you've said you are interested in changing people's lives. Do you have a hesitancy to engage in politics because of how your mom has been treated in her life?
No, because I see her get up every day and still engage. And so for me, the decision to not even think about kind of running for the seat that Congresswoman Nita Lowey will leave at the end of next year is more about an affirmation of what I'm doing now. And I'm thrilled that there are already so many people who have thrown their hats into the ring. And I hope that young people don't kind of see the toxicity in this moment and turn away from it. I hope they see it and say, I want to change that. And I want to get back to a place of science and evidence-based decisions and respect for our democracy and respect for the rule of law. So I hope people take it perversely as an opportunity for what must be different, and then be part of the change of doing that.
You know, because it hasn't always been like that. We've had partisanship from the very beginning, but there's also been a lot of effort to find common ground. So back to the Nixon impeachment, when the articles of impeachment were voted on, members of the Republican Party in the Congress voted for one or more of them. So there has been many times, we write about Margaret Chase Smith, a Republican woman senator from Maine, who was the first member of her party to stand up to Joseph McCarthy in the early 1950s. So we've had not only people, but a consensus around what it is we're trying to protect and cherish. And So I can hope that maybe there'll be enough people who make their decision not on, protecting the president, but protecting the country. Either way they end up.
It's interesting because many of the women you've written about in the book also share one common trait, and that is the obstacles they had to overcome often included being accused of things or being scrutinized in a way that was not similar to the men around them, to their male counterparts. How would you respond to a Trump supporter if they took the time to listen to you and said, Hillary, I don't think it's fair that Trump is going to be impeached for getting information from Ukraine when your team engaged in Russian information through, the team that worked on that side on the Steele dossier? How do you respond to that person when they say, you engaged in foreign information on a political rival, Trump did the same, what is the difference?
There's a huge difference. If you look at the power that the president holds, the president is in a position to use American leverage and credibility to achieve the goals of our nation. So I could imagine a conversation where a president would say to the president of Ukraine, you're new at the job. One of the things that has held you back is corruption. We want to help you fight corruption, but we want evidence that you are really dedicated to fighting corruption.
Right.
If that's all that had been said, there's nothing wrong with that. As Secretary of State, I used to go and visit leaders and say, one of your biggest problems is you've got rampant corruption. It's in your family. It's in your people around you. You've got to deal with it. But that's not what happened. And we now have not only the whistleblower and the alleged incomplete transcript, we now have a lot of witnesses who are all saying this was about helping the president himself. He is acting as the president. He's not a political candidate.
Right.
He is not a private citizen. He's the president. And
he now works for the United States.
He works for the United States, and we don't want to squander our credibility. So if other countries see this, as they clearly are, that this president really could care less about Ukraine, could care less whether it becomes a stable country, could care less whether it's able to defend itself against Russia, all he wants is for them to manufacture some kind of damaging information about the person he thinks is his likely opponent, Joe Biden. So there's a huge difference. I mean, people can gather, information in, all kinds of different ways. But when you combine it with that quid pro quo that existed in that conversation, which has now been verified repeatedly by people who were in the room, people who were under pressure to deprive the Ukrainians of military aid so they could defend themselves. There's an active war going on in eastern Ukraine. The Russians and their proxies are still killing Ukrainians. And so what this president has basically done is say, I don't care. I don't care about any of that. I just need some dirt. And I don't care if you make it up. In order to get military aid, you've got to give me something on Joe Biden and his son.
It really does seem like Trump has taken an unconventional approach, to say the least, in international affairs. He's been very explicit in saying it's America first and that's all I care about. Syria has been an interesting case. And as a former secretary, you have the ability to speak to this with an in-depth knowledge. Trump said, I pulled the troops out because it's time for America to leave these endless wars. Everyone spoke out against Trump for doing this. But it was one of your former ambassadors, Robert Ford, who said at one point that the alliance with the Kurds was never meant to be permanent. It was just meant to be a temporary coming together because both sides wanted to beat ISIS and they weren't allies of all time. What do you think is the more correct approach then?
Look, I don't think his real philosophy is America first. I think it's Trump first. And he judges everything as to how it will help him. And perhaps he impulsively decided that bringing our troops home was good for him politically, and that seems to be how he is justifying it. But let's assume we had a president who was interested in achieving that goal in a defensible way. Here's what could have happened. He could have very well have said to the people who know something about Syria, the Kurds, the Turks, and others, and said, we need to start a process in order to figure out how we can protect the Kurds, who have been our allies. Maybe not for all time, but they sure have been sacrificing on behalf of our objective to drive the Islamic State out of Syria. And we know they're holding tens of thousands of prisoners
Right.
for us. So let's not leave them to their fates. Let's figure out how we work with the Turks, who are worried about their border. Let's see how we work with the Kurds. Let's use the leverage we have, because we still have troops that are special forces who are working alongside the Kurds. And let's figure out how we're going to make this happen. Instead of just waking up and walking to the South Lawn of the White House and say, we're bringing all our troops home, and I've talked to President Erdogan. And since we don't know what he says on these calls, for all we know, it could be, hey, President Erdogan, we're going to take our troops out. What do you have on Joe Biden? We don't know.
Right.
And that's what's so frightening about what's happening, because he has an affinity for dictators. He's clearly misjudged the North Koreans. Kim Jong-un has been firing missiles and obviously not behaving the way that a meeting with the president should have led him to. He clearly does Putin's bidding. I mean, Putin could not be happier to have the Ukrainians caught up in this while he continues to, eat away at their country and their sovereignty. The Russians have a huge amount of influence now in the Middle East, because they're right there in Syria alongside the Iranians and propping up the Assad government. So there's a lot of moving pieces on this complex chessboard. And I've been in a White House situation room where the president was demanding information, not acting on impulse, where we were running through different scenarios, where we had to be constantly testing our opinions against others in order to give the president the best advice. That is not happening in this White House. It is, unfortunately, unpredictable about what he will do next. So therefore, other countries, particularly ones adversarial to us, are going around the world saying, you can't count on America anymore.
Right.
Count on us. We'll sell you arms, not the Americans. We'll make deals with you, not the Americans. We'll have investments in your country, not the Americans. And it's a tragedy, because I think we were really well positioned at the end of the Obama administration to keep building on our leadership. And I think that's been squandered under this president.
Let me ask you one question before we wrap it up. The Book of Gutsy Women talks about women who have done something amazing throughout time. One thing that we can't deny has changed throughout time has been politics and the way we see the world. I've always been fascinated as to your relationship. You are your mother's daughter, yes, but you are younger than her. Are there ever political ideas or conversations you have where you don't agree, or you've changed how you see an idea because of your age difference?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I think most notably on gay marriage and equal marriage rights, which is something that we talked about extensively.
Wow.
Throughout years. And I'm really grateful and proud of my mom for her shift to being just a dogged, determined, not only supporter, but advocate for equal marriage rights.
So you were like in the house and you were like, Mom, gotta get gay rights going, come on.
I mean,
it's like a weird fight to be having with your mom. I was like, I want to go to a party, and you were like, Mom, gay people need to get married. Go to your room, young lady. That's pretty wild.
I mean,
well, Chelsea
yes,
was,
but hopefully in a nicer tone.
but Chelsea was, really one of the strong voices on behalf of gay marriage here in New York. She, gave lots of speeches. She was part of a group of leaders that were advocating for it. And, I really respect and listen to her about all kinds of things. And this was something that made a lot of sense to me, especially because she had such passion about it.
Well, I'll tell you this. It is a book of gutsy women written by two of the gutsiest. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Trevor.
Wonderful having you here. The Book of Gutsy Women is available now. Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton, everybody.